What's up guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you are new here, my name is Beth and today's video is a super exciting one because I finally get to give you guys my first trimester update. It still feels so weird to now be able to actually talk about this now that you guys know. We've kept it under wraps for a little while now, but I am currently 14 weeks and 3 days, which means that baby is the size of a, let's confirm, a navel orange. So in this video, I'm gonna be basically going over everything that I've wanted to fill you guys in now for literally weeks. Like I'm gonna go over our due date, how I found out I was pregnant, why I even took the test, the symptoms I've been having, cravings I've been experiencing, the first ultrasound that we had, whether we're going to be having a hospital birth or a home birth, literally all of the stuff I'm gonna go over in this video. I'm also super excited because I get to work with an incredible sponsor today, BetterHelp. They have an awesome offer for you guys, so if any of that sounds interesting to you, then just keep on watching. Okay, so quick recap for those of you who might be new here. I am a, right now, first-time mom to a baby girl. Her name is Vivian. She is currently 9 months old, but will be turning 10 months old close to around the time that this video goes out. And my baby was only 7 months old when I found out that I was pregnant with baby number 2. So I was very much still fresh into the world of motherhood, still breastfeeding. I got my period back at 6 weeks postpartum. So obviously it was possible for me to get pregnant that entire time. I knew that. My husband and I used the natural family planning method. We were kind of close to the line to when things could potentially result in pregnancy, but it was still 5 days out for ovulation. If you don't understand how all of that stuff works with natural family planning method, it's a lot for me to explain in this video, but essentially you can still get pregnant with sperm living inside you for up to, I don't know if it's 5 or 6 days, but there is potential for that to happen. And in my case, it did. To tell you guys how I actually found out, I did film myself finding out, and I have that full reaction video that I'm gonna be uploading in a couple of weeks. But essentially, I was home alone when I found out. Jared was actually away on a work trip. My period was just late at that point, but that wasn't anything that uncommon for me because again, I was breastfeeding. Other thing that is funny about it is if you guys watch my channel, you would know that my husband, my baby, and myself all had COVID back in January as well. So in January, we were all quite sick, and one of the symptoms that I had with COVID was nausea. And I was like, I must have long COVID, this nausea is so bad, but turns out I was actually just pregnant. The other thing that I did notice is that my milk supply was really starting to take a hit. The reason I didn't think that that was connected to pregnancy was because I have also talked about on my channel, my milk supply would drop basically every single month before my period came. So I thought that that meant that my period was actually coming, not that I was already pregnant. I take pregnancy tests often. That's just something that I will put out there for myself. If my period's a little bit late, I'm I might as well take the test and just know that I'm pregnant or not pregnant. And my husband Jared always would get so annoyed because pregnancy tests aren't cheap, and he's like, just wait a couple more days, allow yourself to get the period, and I promise you you're not pregnant. But he wasn't here. So I took it, and surprise, surprise, I was pregnant. In the moment, I felt so many things finding out. I think the first thing that I felt was just it was just pure and utter shock that I have never experienced before. And probably initially a little bit of fear. I think the fear was mostly just the worry of am I still gonna be able to go back to work? Because we had just planned all of this stuff. I had literally just signed on to return back to work. It felt like things were just kind of getting back into place again after having Vivian. So all of that was mixed in there, but obviously, of course, there were the feelings of just pure excitement and just feeling this is such a gift, and just knowing this is gonna be such a blessing to us. And that was kind of what overruled everything. I think after I took some time to just pray and release a lot of that initial fear and worry to God and just exchange that for His peace and his joy in everything, that was what allowed me to kind of get to that place of feeling like, okay, at the end of the day, this is a gift and we're gonna treat it like that. And so that was kind of the headspace that I was processing through as soon as I found out. That actually leads me really well into telling you guys about today's sponsor, and that is BetterHelp. So thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. If you are at a place in your life where you are dealing with a lot of maybe worry or anxiety or stress, or there's just things that are holding you back from happiness, maybe you are also finding out that you're gonna be welcoming a baby into the world soon and you're just processing through a lot in that life change, BetterHelp could be for you. BetterHelp will assess your needs and help to match you with your own online licensed therapist that you can start communicating with within 48 hours. It's not a crisis line, it's not self-help, it is professional therapy done securely online, and BetterHelp has more than 20,000 licensed therapists in their network, so it could be a really great option if you're having a harder time finding a therapist that works well in your area. You can log into your account at any time and send a message to your therapist, and you'll get a timely and thoughtful response. And you can also set up weekly phone or video chats with your therapist so you never have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room like you would with most traditional therapy. BetterHelp honestly just wants you to be able to start living a happier life today, which is why their therapy options are more affordable than traditional offline therapy, and they also have financial aid available. Another thing is that they currently have an offer right now for viewers of my channel to save some money. So if you go to betterhelp.com, and that is betterhelp.com/BethMoore, you can actually get 10% off of your first month. If you guys do choose to use this link, I will earn commissions on your referrals. Just want to be totally transparent with that. So thank you so much for your support of my channel and BetterHelp. But again, you can visit betterhelp.com, that is HELP.com, and you can join the over 2 million individuals that are taking charge of their mental health by working with an experienced professional. So thank you so much to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. All right, so let's get into all of the nitty-gritty of the symptoms that I have been experiencing in this pregnancy. I think it's so interesting hearing how people's symptoms vary from one pregnancy to another, because again, every pregnancy is so different, but you don't really have an understanding of that until you get pregnant yourself for a second time. It has been so different this time than it was with Vivian in like a number of ways. I would say that in some ways it's actually been a lot easier, but then in others it's been a lot harder. Some of the ways that it's been easier are, number one, the fact that I am actually at home on mat leave in my first trimester this time, and in my first trimester with Vivian and throughout my entire pregnancy, I was working a desk job in an office. And I would still say that I was like surviving a lot of the first trimester at home with Vivian, but I was able to actually like go and take a nap when she was napping, and that was a game changer this time around. Another interesting thing about this second pregnancy is that my nausea has been very inconsistent. So from weeks 5 to 7-ish, I would say that my nausea in this pregnancy was actually worse than it was the first time with Vivian. I was vomiting a lot more, and I would vomit like not from tastes or smells or anything like that, but from things just like irritating my gag reflex. And one of the worst things is that it was almost always triggered by taking my prenatals. I found that I was consistently nauseous for like those 3 weeks, but then after that I would only throw up when I took my prenatal. And I don't know if it was the process of like swallowing a big pill, the fact that the one that I was taking was kind of fishy, and just like I did not vibe with it. So I am now taking a gummy prenatal, which may not be the best type of prenatal, but it's the one that I can keep down. However, in those 3 weeks where I was feeling like consistently nauseous every single day and it just like didn't go away, I actually talked to my doctor and got a prescription for diclectin, which is what I took throughout most of first trimester with Vivian. And I was like right about to start taking it, but I just like had a bad feeling all of a sudden and did a little bit of research and discovered that it is not actually really breastfeeding safe. So it's safe for your baby in pregnancy, but if you're also breastfeeding a baby, it can have a little bit of risk associated with it. So I ended up deciding to not take anything, and so I was literally just like surviving every single day. I remembered a lot of the processes that like worked to help me kind of cope the first time I was pregnant. So I would wake up and I would eat right away. I would make sure that I had food in me every 2 hours. I would drink water. Basically, I was doing all of those things to help myself kind of cope, like chewing gum and taking Tums. But overall, it was just like 3 weeks of like really hard nausea and pure exhaustion. And then all of a sudden at like week 8 or 9, that nausea went away. At that point in time, I actually felt like quite similar to what I felt like in second trimester with Vivian. So I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden, like I got a little bit more of my energy back. My motivation levels were still pretty low. We're still dealing with that now. But overall, like that consistent feeling of nausea went away. I did throw up a little bit here and there, but again, it was only really when I took those prenatals. I feel like I would say that this like experience with first trimester and pregnancy so far has been easier than my first. The only thing that has been harder is the fact that like I have been so exhausted, as you are in first trimester, and this time around there are no breaks. There were so many days where I lived on the couch and just needed like to let the housework pile up because I just like couldn't function, but I still had to take care of this child. That was one thing that was so different from the desk job, is like I was still just sitting there and could kind of like take breaks and like go at my own pace. But with a baby at home while you're pregnant, you cannot do that. That baby still needs you. You still have to get up when they cry. If they wake up in the night, you have to get up with them for their early mornings. You have to change their diapers still, whether or not the smell is really bothering you. You still have to make their meals and clean up and do all of these things, which are obviously all a blessing, but when you are so exhausted, it's really hard to maintain all of that. To survive through that stage, I feel like I basically just allowed myself to do the absolute bare minimum. Like when it came to the house, there was, I think, maybe a couple of weeks that I took off of YouTube and like just didn't say anything. I got really quiet on Instagram. I just like allowed myself to have the space that I needed to rest and to still have somewhat of like a sense of energy to take care of Vivian and to be there for my husband. And that meant that housework had to pile up a little bit. There were multiple times that I considered hiring a cleaner, but we just like let the expectation go for a couple of weeks and things ended up getting better again. It is a totally different world to be pregnant in that scenario, and so I understand and feel you and am praying for you if you are in that situation right now. So before I get into cravings and stuff like that, I wanted to talk a little bit about having to wean, because again, another symptom that I had in pregnancy was my milk supply dropping. I have had like a low supply throughout my entire breastfeeding journey. My milk came in like so hot off the hop and I had so much of it. And during that stage, like no one really told me that I should pump and like make a freezer supply, because I kept feeling like this was like not a finite resource and it would just keep coming. And that is something I know for next time. I will not do it that way again. But I ended up like throughout my breastfeeding journey taking medication that would actually help to increase prolactin production and get my supply back up. So essentially, I would use that medication for about a week leading up to my period, and it would help me to kind of navigate and mitigate my supply dropping when I got my period. So at like 7 months postpartum, when I was still waiting for my period to come and thought that it was going to be coming, I again like noticed that dip in my supply and started taking this prescription medication again to try and get that back up. Obviously, my period never came. I was actually pregnant. So as soon as I found out, I stopped taking the prescription medication immediately. However, that meant that I was very quickly losing my supply and was still breastfeeding my 7-month-old. So that was a really tricky thing, because I felt like for myself personally, I wasn't ready to wean yet. Vivian had been taking a bottle really well at that point, and she was showing a lot of signs of readiness to wean. Like for example, she was super distracted every time we fed, whether we were in a room with a ton of people or we were in a quiet and dark room alone. She just wanted to play. She wanted to crawl around. She was getting really frustrated because my letdown was so slow. And if she saw a bottle like in the background in the kitchen or whatever when I was feeding her, she would literally reach for it while I was breastfeeding her. So I ended up coming to the decision that I was going to start the weaning process like slowly but surely. And it took me about a month and a half to fully wean her, like from all feeds entirely. She did really, really well with it. It was obviously very emotional for me, but I think because I was already pregnant, I didn't experience the like breastfeeding weaning hormones that some people talk about. I literally just felt the pregnancy hormones, which kind of masked it a bit. Since then, everything has been really good. She's taking the bottles of formula really well. She's continuing to grow. And so it was a kind of a weird weaning process mixed in with all of that first trimester stuff. I'm gonna get into a little bit more of that in a separate like breastfeeding journey video, but I wanted to update you guys that I did wean her in first trimester as well. All right, let's talk about cravings. I have had way more cravings and aversions this time than I had last time. Toward the beginning of like every pregnancy, I seem to have this weird craving for like ketchup and just carbs in general. So like ketchup in fries, ketchup in hash browns, ketchup on like a burger, ketchup in chicken fingers, like literally anything ketchup and carbs. I also wrote down that I was craving, this is the weirdest craving I had, pizza pockets with ranch and hot sauce. Jared was watching a YouTube video one day, I think it was like a gamer, and he had been eating that, and I literally sent him out to get me pizza pockets with ranch and hot sauce because I could not get the idea of it out of my head, and it sounded so good. In this pregnancy though, I have been craving sweets way more than I've been craving salty food, which is funny because that's the reverse of my last pregnancy. Like now I'm craving Nesquik cereal, which is also so specific, but also McFlurries, grapes, oranges, chocolate covered strawberries, like literally everything sweet that I can get my hands on. A common thing that I experience, that I think a lot of people experience, is that I can't drink coffee in my first trimester. For whatever reason, the thought of it makes me literally ill. And that includes like the coffee that I make at home, but also coffee from Starbucks or like a cafe or literally any of the places that I would typically love to go and get a coffee. I just couldn't. So the pure exhaustion is just amplified from the caffeine withdrawal, but I am happy to report that I've been able to reintroduce coffee since I've made it to second trimester. So before I go into the footage from the first ultrasound that we did, I also wanted to fill you guys in on one other big change in this pregnancy. In my first pregnancy, I used a doctor and I ended up actually being induced around 38 or like 39 weeks for macrosomia, which is basically just like your baby's huge. I didn't have a bad experience working with an OB or having a hospital birth by any means. However, it wasn't what I originally intended when I got pregnant the first time. I actually did start out working with a midwife, but because of some issues and family history of blood disorders, they wanted me to do some testing, and the results that I needed to get back wouldn't have come back until after my due date had already passed. And so my midwife and I had to make the hard decision for me to actually switch to, my baby just woke up if you can hear the screaming upstairs, to switch to an OB. This time around, it is my hope and my dream to not have to have an induction, so I actually am going to be working with a midwife again. In Canada, the way that it works is if you have to end up getting induced, you would switch over to an OB for the induction, but your midwife could still kind of care for you up until that point. So this time I am working with a midwife. I'm hoping to go into labor naturally without an induction. We're gonna keep an eye on the like fundal measurements and how baby is measuring closer to the 36-week mark. So we won't know for sure how big this baby is looking until that point. But I am really excited to be working with a midwife throughout hopefully the entire duration of my pregnancy this time. There's so many reasons why I like made that decision the first time, but also the second time as well. One of the reasons being the fact that they like actually come to your house, and it just feels like such like more of a personalized experience. The other thing is, at least in Canada, your OB is often not even the person that's delivering your baby. Like it ends up being whatever OB is on call that night. And I don't know, I just found that overall I would feel a lot better like knowing the person that's gonna be there with me in that experience and just like having that support. And so I'm really looking forward to using a midwife this time. In terms of location of birth, I feel like this has become more of like a hot topic or like thing that people are doing these days when it comes to home birth specifically. I think there are a lot of great elements of home births, and like I have done a lot of research on it. At this point in time, at least like at the 14-week mark of my pregnancy, I am planning on delivering in a hospital with a midwife. I think that like I am more comfortable with that at this point. My husband's more comfortable with that at this point. I am very much open to it with future pregnancies, but right now, I don't know. I feel like because I had an induction the first time around, like I don't know what it's like to actually labor without having Pitocin. I'm obviously gonna labor for as long as I can at home before going in, but then ideally would have a hospital birth with a midwife this time around. All right, so I'm gonna show you guys the footage from our first ultrasound that we had done at 11.5 weeks. Good morning, guys. Today is first ultrasound day. I don't know at what point you guys will see this footage or like what video it will end up being stitched into, but we're on our way right now for me to get my first scan. So this is like the 8, 9/10 week scan. I actually don't know when most people get it done, but I'm on my way to have it now at the place that I ended up going to last time, which was pretty good. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to like do much filming in there, but I'm going to try and get like a little bit of something. Last time they let me FaceTime Jared into it to see some of the scans, so if I get some of that footage I'll include it. But essentially this is the one that you have to go in with like the super full bladder, and they tell you like how far along you are and like what your estimated due date is. So I have to pee so bad right now. Feel good about it. I'm exhausted because I didn't get much sleep last night, and it was a mixture of like being a little bit nervous about it today, but also just like everything. I was just like up thinking about it all. And then this morning at like 5 a.m. I was wide awake because I kept feeling like, because this appointment is at 8 a.m. that I was gonna like sleep through it. We wouldn't have Vivian ready in time and I was just gonna miss it. And so I was literally just like laying awake waiting for the appointment to roll around, which was awesome. But we're on the way now and I'm feeling good. I'm feeling a lot less anxious going into this than I did into like the first ultrasound for my last pregnancy. I was saying to Jared, like with Vivian's pregnancy, I spent so much time like in that first trimester just feeling like, I don't know like if she's gonna be okay, like I don't know what's gonna happen, like miscarriage is so common in my family, like going into it. And then everything was totally fine. And so now I feel like that I have had that experience of like being worried and anxious for nothing. I'm just gonna like trust that God's gonna be faithful again. And so yeah, I literally have no reason to believe otherwise. So we're gonna go in, see how it goes, and then give you guys an update on the way out. Okay, we are back. I wanted to give you guys a little update on how the ultrasound went. Essentially, it went really, really well, which is such a huge like relief. Again, like I wasn't super concerned going into it, but it is also just nice like leaving that appointment and having full confidence that everything in the pregnancy is going well. My first ultrasound with Vivian was at a different clinic and it was honestly so awful. Basically, she just said like, I'm not allowed to tell you anything. Like I asked her if the heart was beating, like if my baby was okay, and she's like, I'm not allowed to tell you that. Like you have to wait and follow up with your doctor. So I left like seeing scans, but didn't know if anything was like actually going well in the pregnancy, and that sucked. So I ended up like asking around and found a new clinic, and then I used that clinic throughout the rest of my pregnancy last time. And so this time I just like started there, and I'm so glad I did, because the tech that I had today was so sweet. She was actually like showing me everything on the scans and explaining what we were looking at. So the biggest takeaway from that ultrasound is that I'm actually measuring like a little bit further ahead than we were thinking. She's saying that I'm actually, instead of measuring like 10 weeks, which is what I came into the ultrasound today thinking, like it was just the dating ultrasound, but she was like, this is actually more of like the 11 or 12 week ultrasound because you're measuring at like 11.5. She was saying that's likely because we conceived earlier, but that like doesn't add up because I literally like did have a period on January 3rd. That was like the last period that I had. And so I automatically, when I heard that, was like, Lord, is this another huge baby? But she was saying that like at this point in the stage of my pregnancy, like it doesn't actually mean anything with like baby's final size, like, or like the actual weight that they'll be when they're born. It was just triggering because the last time that I heard like, oh, you're actually measuring at like 40 weeks even though you're 36 was right when I found out that like Vivian would be born with what's considered like macrosomia. Ultimately, I'm just happy that everything is like looking good, like baby's growing very quickly and is happy and healthy in there. But it is interesting and I'm like just curious to see how things track with this time around. So I don't know, we're gonna have to keep an eye on that. So again, at that first ultrasound, I went into it thinking I was like 9.5, 10 weeks and ended up finding out I was closer to 12 weeks. So I got a call from our midwife a couple days later later, basically letting us know that our due date had changed from what was originally October 15th all the way up to October 5th. So that is our new due date for baby number 2. It is October 5th, 2022. Other things that the midwife let us know after the ultrasound was that the heart rate was 165 beats per minute, which was very similar to what Vivian's was. And then the other thing is that there was actually a marker on the ultrasound at 11 and a half weeks that they said they weren't super concerned about, was just something to be aware of. So they did offer additional testing to us, but Jared and I talked about it and prayed about it. And honestly, we feel like we're just gonna kind of wait and see what kind of happens at the 20-week mark. We do just feel like total peace about it and no really worry at this point in time. We're just gonna wait and see what happens at 20 weeks and are just trusting God throughout the process. Before I wrap this video up, I wanna give you guys a little bump date. This is what the bump is currently looking like. This is at 14 weeks. It has just come out so much faster this time around. This pregnancy has honestly been flying by. At the same time, because we just did this, I've said a couple times that it has honestly a little bit felt like my pregnancy with Vivian is just kind of like blending into this pregnancy with baby number 2. So I'm trying to really allow myself to like have a clear distinction between each of them and enjoy this pregnancy as like its own separate thing, which is why I'm still like going on and checking to see what size baby is in relation to a piece of fruit every day and like trying to give myself that experience too, because it is still special and I don't want to blink and have it all just kind of like pass by. Well, I am going to wrap up this video here just like I am finally wrapping up my first trimester. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure that you give it a like before you head out today. That way you can see more of my content on your YouTube page as well. But also go and check out some of my other pregnancy content. I have a really great first trimester survival guide video that I literally watched myself in first trimester the second time around just to get a refresher on all that stuff. So I will link that up here, but also put it down in the description box for you guys to check out. And also let me know in the comment section whether you think that baby number 2 is going to be a boy or a girl. I'm super interested to start hearing your guesses on all of that. So make sure to do that before you head out today. But until my next video, I love you guys. I'm praying for you guys and I will see you soon.
Talk for hours and never